Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of The End of the Week, a series that I'm starting that's going to focus on the national security stories that I have been following for the week and give a little bit of my own commentary for those stories. For those of you who don't know, my name is Morgan Houston, aka Whiskey Mo, and I am a national security researcher and scholar of irregular warfare and information. I'm currently at Colorado Mesa University, and I want to say thank you for tuning in. Before we get too far, please click all of the buttons, like subscribe and follow, and do all the things. It will help increase the reach of what I think are important topics and bring them to the average viewer. Also in my description, you will find links to my biography, my Substack, where I dive into these topics a little bit deeper, and as well as the Patreon if you feel like you can choose to support me that way. Thanks, and let's get on to the news. This week, there are two somewhat interconnected stories that I have been following. The first has been the raid in Caracas, Venezuela, that captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. After the successful raid, the increased attention on Greenland as a national security issue and the U.S. ownership increased because of that concern. Now to Venezuela. In the early morning of January 2nd and 3rd, 2026, elements of the U.S. military, led by the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, commonly known as Delta Force, or the Combat Applications Group, successfully captured Nicolas Maduro in a daring raid that included over 150 American aircraft, utilizing all aspects of American warfare, from electronic warfare, airstrikes, and stealth capabilities. The morning of January 3rd brought a ton of attention to this raid, and everyone was interested to see what the comments were. The president and his team declared that Nicolas Maduro was captured to bring him to face charges in an indictment that included charges of racketeering and drug smuggling. Claims were made that Maduro was a central figure in the fentanyl smuggling that brought illegal narcotics to the United States, and that he was tied to many of the cartels from Venezuela. Additionally, the president stated that the U.S. was going to, quote, run the country, end quote, and that they were going to invite American oil companies to rebuild the oil infrastructure to increase the flow of oil and oil products into the global market, and then return that money both to the Venezuelan people and to the United States. This week, there has not been much clarity on what that is going to look like, as even right now, the vice president of Venezuela has been sworn in as the acting president and claims that Nicolas Maduro is still the legal president of Venezuela. There are some legal concerns about the legality of this raid. It has come to light that the executive team did not notify the House or Senate Armed Services Committees, as is required by law when utilizing American military forces in such a way. Also, no clear acts have been taken to attempt to chastise the president or his team, but the conversation has continued to grow about what the proper action to take is. As with many things with this administration, the news is so fast and furious that much of this conversation has now faded into the background. In the days after the Maduro raid, the president began to question whether Greenland should be a part of the United States. This is not the first time that President Trump has spoken about his desire to claim Greenland as part of the United States. Previously, it floated the idea of purchasing Greenland from the Kingdom of Denmark, but what makes this one different is that now he is beginning to speak about using military action to take Greenland from Denmark and bring it into the United States. The raison d'etre that has been given is that there are fears of increased Chinese and Russian activities in the Arctic. If the United States were to own Greenland, they would be able to project more power, essentially using Greenland as a big aircraft carrier in the Arctic region. This declaration has raised many concerns amongst the people of Greenland, the Kingdom of Denmark, NATO, and as well as across the globe. Some within NATO have stated that if the United States were to invade Greenland, this would be the end of the NATO alliance. Others have bemoaned the end of the liberal rules-based order and that the return of the might makes right doctrine has increased the risk of international destabilization. Many within the administration have claimed that this is necessary to increase the national security of the United States. Now, what do I think about both of these stories? They're both interconnected as they both have been pitched as national security issues affecting the United States. One has to do with the influx of narcotics, and the other has to do with protecting against Chinese and Russian aggression in the Arctic. The interconnectedness of these stories comes from what we can call the reassertion of the might makes right doctrine of the 18th and 19th centuries. This was the idea that it was legally allowable for nations to conquer, invade, and conduct war against others, and for the protection of the aggressor nation's rights. Obviously, this has led to many wars of aggression that had nothing to do with the rights of the aggressor nation. This led to the creation eventually of the 1928 Kellogg-Briand Pact, which made wars of aggression illegal and prohibited territorial conquest. Most nations signed onto this agreement, and then in 1945, this commitment was expanded by the UN Charter, which the United States is a signatory of. Now, why should we be concerned about the might makes right ideology? As we have seen with two world wars, the lasting effects and ramifications of violence can destabilize economies and entire nations. When the underlying aspect of the international diplomacy is the use of violence against one another, no longer is international cooperation incentivized. Now, it's all about who has the bigger gun. As the modern economy of nearly every nation has become entangled with each other, destabilizing nations and national economies can only lead to disastrous second and third order effects. The United States is intricately intertwined with the rest of the global order. Despite any attempt to state otherwise, the United States has benefited from the rise of globalization as well as the international market. The state of the world has come about from the export of U.S. cultural identity and products, from movies to music to McDonald's in nearly every nation of the world. That power has a risk of decreasing if this type of ideology continues. Additionally, the U.S. already has a substantial agreement with the Kingdom of Denmark on the use of Greenland and the protection of itself and NATO allies. The agreement in 1951 between the Kingdom of Denmark and the United States gives fairly substantial free rein to the United States to base troops and materiel in defense of the alliance. At one point, the United States had 17 bases located on the island of Greenland, and thousands of troops were stationed there. Currently, there is already a listening post of the U.S. Space Force located above the Arctic Circle in Greenland. If national security is truly the reason for this move to try and occupy Greenland, this demonstrates that the administration is either disturbingly unaware or even more disturbingly ignorant of the agreements with an ally that has done much to protect U.S. national security. Senator Tom Tillis, a Republican from North Carolina, accurately pointed out in his speech that Denmark has sacrificed much for the protection of the United States. Only once in the 80-year history of NATO has Article 5, the commitment to treat an attack on one as an attack on all, been implemented. And this was after the attacks on September 11th, 2001. The Kingdom of Denmark, a country of around 6 million, deployed over 18,000 troops to Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. And this was not in support roles, but in direct frontline combat. And 43 Danish citizens lost their lives fighting alongside their British and American allies. I have concerns about the way that we are treating a very steadfast ally. What does this show our other allies about the commitment that the U.S. has to our treaty obligations? My hope is that the administration will abandon the move to occupy Greenland and instead work in line with and hand in hand with the Kingdom of Denmark to assuage their national security concerns, which would also be concerns of the Danish government. A whole of government approach to national security means not just using the military, but also diplomacy and soft power as well. As far as the Maduro raid, I do have some mixed feelings. I do believe that Venezuela today is in a better place than it was under a Maduro government. Nicolas Maduro was objectively a bad man. He subverted the diplomatic process. He ignored the will of the people in the last election. And there's bits of evidence that point to some ties to drug trafficking. However, most of that is directed towards Europe and not the United States. However, I question the way that this came about. Seizing the president of another country, especially when war has not been declared by our own legislative body, sets a disturbing precedent. It opens the United States to similar actions, even though it is fairly unlikely that this could happen. However, there is no guarantee that American power will be maintained at its current level. Do we really want to open up our own borders to the risk of a raid to snatch our own president? I'm interested to see what outcomes are when it comes to the Senate and House response to this raid. However, because the news moves at such a breakneck speed nowadays, I don't know if they will actually have time to properly address it. However, kudos to the men and women who were part of this raid because it continues to demonstrate that American power military power is unmatched, and the capabilities of our Tier 1 units, special operators, and even conventional soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians is completely and utterly unmatched. Hey, y'all. If you made it this far, I just want to say a big thank you for watching this first episode of the End of the Week. I hope to make this a weekly show where I discuss a couple of national security stories that I'm interested in and add a little bit of my own commentary. Please, if you found any value in this, please click the like button, share, the subscribe button, all the things that YouTube asks for. If you think that people will find this interesting, please give them a heads up. Let them know that this is happening. I know there's a lot happening in the world, and I hope to bring this in a way that makes it a little bit more digestible to the average viewer. Down below, you will find all of my links where you can find out a little bit about me, what I write about national security, specifically irregular warfare, air power, and information. And then you can also support me on Patreon, help make this a little bit more possible. Check out next week when our episode will drop on Saturday at noon Mountain Time. I'm Morgan Houston, and I will see you at the end of the week.